This episode of Where Did the Road Go is brought to you in part by our Patreons. If you want to become a patron, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? Tonight I am joined by Wren Collier.
Hey everyone.
And Cherylee Black.
Hi there.
And we're gonna start off. This is not a fringe news show, but we're gonna start off with a little bit of semi-news type of thing, I guess. I don't even know what to call it. Cherylee, you were watching the new In Search Of.
Yeah, and I really wanted to like that show.
And I have not seen it. Wren, have you seen it?
The new In Search Of?
Yeah.
Nah, I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I didn't even know it was out until you guys were talking about it in the Slack, so.
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead, Cherylee.
Okay. I was going to say, the original series, I love that series. I watched that series as a kid and reruns, after school. And
oh, yeah.
Just, it was just one of those things. And I mean, even as a kid, I knew that they were taking a very, slant. They had, a certain bias when they did those shows, but it was okay because it was just made you think about things differently, and they were entertaining and warm. Mm-hmm. It was, I just, even today, like I'll watch some of those old shows on YouTube and they hold up surprisingly well. So, when they said they were going to have a new show with the new Spock.
Oh, is that who's doing it?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah,
Zachary Quinto. Since the old Spock did the old show, they have new Spock doing the new show. And and it really should have been informed by how the original series was done, and it wasn't, because it was just disappointing on so many levels. But I think what really got to me is I was watching the first episode, which was In Search of Aliens. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, even that whole thing, I mean, anyone who's read Jacques Vallée would kind of say, well, are they aliens or what are they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right there, as soon as you're classifying them as aliens, well, you're making a lot of assumptions about what the kinds of experiences people might be having are all about. So, I mean, right there, that's a problem. But then there's just the issue of basic science that bothered me, because they present themselves as being very, very scientific, and that let's get things done at a proper laboratory and we'll find evidence for these things or not.
Right.
And anyone watching the show, I guess what really bothered me was it came down to they had a piece of a possible alien implant. Because they had an experiencer on the show who claimed that he had this implant taken out of his foot by Dr. Roger Lear. Now, I don't think they even mentioned Dr. Lear's name in the episode, but the only reason I know that's who it was is because I afterwards went and watched Patient 17, and this wasn't Patient 17. Apparently, he was actually Patient 15.
Okay.
But he was one of Dr. Roger Lear's patients. And anyway, so they took this item and they said they were going to have it analyzed to see if it was extraterrestrial in origin.
How would you qualify that?
Yeah. Exactly. And see, right there, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Is I don't think that that there's any way to constrain that whole what are we classifying as extraterrestrial. And so what they did was they used a scanning electron microscope, an SEM, to do their tests. And it started off where they had this Dr. Kumar, who he was asked, so can you tell if something comes from another planet by looking at it through this machine? And the guy just kind of looked at him, and I mean, clearly he was taking it as a joke.
Mm.
And he was like, well, if I find a brand new element that's not on the periodic table, well, that would be an indication that there's something here that's unique.
Yeah.
But, and I agree, yeah, that would be
Sure.
that would be a big finding. But then, the problem with those machines is that basically they see what they're programmed to see. And if you don't program an element that's not on the periodic table into your database,
Yeah.
it doesn't see it. So there's that. And the other problem is that there are common elements throughout the solar system and beyond. So, and the fact that you're finding iron in something doesn't mean that it came from Earth, because as we know, iron comes from meteorites. We find iron in various places that are not the Earth. And so if you're saying that, well, it would have to be, something that as far as we know doesn't exist to qualify as extraterrestrial, well then really you're not getting any information at all. So yeah. I mean,
it doesn't prove it's from space, though. That's the whole thing. It's like, even if it was a completely new element, you still can't say that it's extraterrestrial. You can just say that it's unique, like the guy said.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was so maddening because the lab equipment that they were using, I mean, it's something I've used probably a few hundred times in the lab, running samples on those machines. Mm-hmm. And they don't really tell you where what you're looking for came from.
Right.
They don't even tell you exact mineralogy. They'll tell you the basic elements. They're there, and you kind of have to guess at what the minerals are. Mm-hmm. Most of the information you're getting from those machines is morphology. I mean, they're really fun. I can see
what's morphology?
How things look like.
Yeah, it's structure.
Okay.
Shapes. Shapes and structure. Okay. So what's really fun about scanning electron microscopes is the visuals. I would have to say that of all the lab equipment I've played with, it's probably my favorite, because you get to see into like a whole nother world of how things look, on a microscopic scale. I mean, it's just amazing. And so I'm guessing that they went with that particular piece of lab equipment simply because it gave visuals rather than numbers.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
What I mean?
Yeah, it's more interesting to, I guess, visually to film or show on a TV show.
Yeah, there was something to see. Whereas if he was just there rattling off numbers, which is what most laboratory equipments give you, is just strings and strings of numbers that you have to interpret. It's not fun.
Well, I see a way that you could use a scanning electron microscope to tell if something was at least non-human, but it'd have to be some sort of technology that we're not aware exists or is not theoretically possible in using what we know of human science right now. Like, say, for instance, it was made of, like you looked at the scanning electron microscope and there were like little nano machines in there or something, or like extremely fine, like nanotubes or something like that was like way beyond what we think we have right now. But even then, it still doesn't prove it's extraterrestrial, because we don't know how far, black projects and that sort of thing have gone. We only know what, kind of exists right now in the open.
Well, and sometimes when you see things on a microscopic scale, you'll see things that look like they're constructed that are actually biologically created. Yeah. One of the things that I've seen that I think are absolutely amazing is certain iron minerals can be precipitated. Basically, algae kind of creates the right conditions for this crystallization to occur. And it does not look like typical rock crystallization. What it looks like on a scanning electron microscope is it looks like tiny little Death Stars.
Huh.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, first time I saw them, I was like, what on earth is this? This is great.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and it's bacterially precipitated iron minerals.
Huh.
Yeah. So, you really have to have a reference point to interpret what you're looking at with those machines.
Yeah.
More so than a lot of laboratory testing would be. So if you're looking at it coming from a background of I'm used to analyzing soil samples from a farmer's field, then that tends to be what you're going to see, because that's how you're going to reference everything, by what you're looking at, which is actually what that particular scientist said, that, oh yeah, you find these elements in the typical farmer's field, which is true. But I could think of other places you'd find them as well. I mean, the test they did really couldn't tell you where that sample came from. It wasn't designed to do the kind of to give the kind of information that they were claiming it was in the show.
So it was just basically to make it look good on TV.
It was. So it was kind of fake science.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And, the only story like that I'd ever found truly compelling too is Whitley Strieber's implant and his story about it. But then because for people who don't know, his implant apparently moved, it had these tendrils or something, and it ran away when the doctor tried to extract it. But there's no evidence of this. He hasn't went back to get it to try to remove it again. And it's I just have to take his word for it. And that's not really good enough for me. So,
especially with something that you could potentially get on video.
Yes, exactly.
So,
yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other issue that I kind of had with the show is that they weren't very kind to the experiencers on the show. And the one experiencer that had sort of come forward, they introduced him as being a scientist, and I didn't realize till later that he was in the movie Patient 17, which was about Dr. Roger Leir having, taking implants out of Patient 17 and then having them analyzed. And this fellow did some of that analysis for that movie. And he also, it turned out, because he sort of comes out in the movie, that he was also patient 15, I believe, that, that there was samples taken out of him as well that he had analyzed. And I guess he did the majority of the analysis himself. So they kind of show them going back and forth, arguing over, where this material came from. And he claimed it was meteoric iron that the little implant was made out of, but he was also kind of claiming a lot of stuff that I couldn't see any evidence for, that it was a transmitter and various other things that didn't make any sense. And
I've heard that before.
Yeah, that it's a transmitter. I mean, it seems fairly easy if it was a transmitter to determine if it was a transmitter. I mean, it would be transmitting something that you could pick up. So,
yeah, one would think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I felt a little badly for him at first, kind of, just having watched that, because it was pretty clear that the TV show was not doing justice to having this sample analyzed, because they should have been doing isotopic analysis, which again wouldn't be 100% of smoking gum saying this is where it's from, but it would certainly give you a much better indication of where the sample was from than you're going to get from using an SEM.
So you're talking about doing spectral analysis on it?
Yeah. Yeah. But like I said, even then, people don't realize how much interpretation there is in science.
It would be interesting to see a spectral analysis of one of these implants, because I would be curious if there's a correlation with the metamaterials. that were taken that Vale examined.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, apparently, and okay, this is where things got really weird. I mean, getting away from the show is I was kind of curious about who this his name, Steve Colburn was, because apparently he was a scientist and he was an experiencer. So I went and watched Patient 17 because someone had recommended that I watch that. And he seems like a fairly serious scientist right up until the end when they get the results. And okay, I guess I better say spoiler alert.
Okay.
in case somebody wants to see the movie and doesn't want to have the ending spoiled.
And this is Patient 13.
Patient 17.
17, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's on Netflix, I believe.
Yeah. Was that in the end, he was claiming that there was definite extraterrestrial origin for the materials that were taken out of Patient 17. However, when is it Jeremy Corbell? He kind of contacted labs and asked for more information. And what he was able to determine was it really seemed that there was a lot that was open to interpretation and that there was nothing conclusive about the results they'd gotten.
Huh.
And that most of the good labs they talked to suggested more testing be done.
Sure.
So they were like, okay, great, we'll get more testing done. And then at the very end of the movie, you find out why they couldn't get more testing done is because this Steve, Colburn, he disappeared with the samples.
Oh.
He stopped answering phone calls from Jeremy Corbell and basically took off with the samples. And I don't know what the status of the samples is at this point. But
that is so typical, though.
It is. It's so par for the course. You see that Bigfoot stuff all over the paranormal. I mean, like that's typical trickster kind of behavior.
Yeah, but it gets worse.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so I started Googling the fellow's name with, so what happened to the Patient 17 samples? Because, I'm curious.
Yeah.
And I found some threads on that Above Top Secret site, as well as a blog that talked about possible connections between that fellow and the Oklahoma bombing.
Huh.
And that he'd had somebody with the same name and the same history and living in the same location seems to have a lot of issues with the police.
Wow.
Huh.
Which again isn't that kind of
par for the course? Yeah.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it just, and like the farther you follow it, the weirder and weirder it just got.
Huh.
So I don't know how, in search of whether they filmed it before he disappeared in the Patient 17 movie, or whether they found him afterwards and he's still doing the UFO circuit. I don't know. Like I just know where the movie ended, where he was kind of gone and he took the samples and they were no more to be seen.
Interesting. Yeah.
And the results were inconclusive.
And this is the thing. I mean, most people are going to watch that and not know what you know because they haven't participated in this type of research. They're not scientists, so they're trusting what they're watching to be giving them some level of honesty, and it sounds very much like they're twisting it just to make it sound interesting.
Yeah. And it's like not one of, like, all of these places where they're claiming to be doing science, there are serious questions about what was done and who did it. And it's just really sad because it's not that hard to do real science.
Right. But if you're not sure of the stuff you're working on and you want to make good TV.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so disillusioned with paranormal shows in general. I really, you always have to kind of wonder, there was one show called Creepy Canada that I used to see on TV here. And they did a show about a haunted amusement park near where I grew up. And I thought, well, that's strange. I don't ever remember hearing about that amusement park that had the ghost of a serial killer wandering around doing people in. So I actually, out of curiosity, I contacted the producers of the show. And they said that, yeah, they kind of got caught on that one, that the original idea came from an Angel Fire blog that made so, and they didn't really have time to investigate the story. And yeah, what they filmed actually wasn't filmed in Canada. It was filmed at some old abandoned amusement park in the States somewhere that has been used in a lot of movies.
Oh, wow.
And so they don't know if there's an actual location or not. And they said that they would have changed the name and location anyway, because you wouldn't want kids just going and looking for these places.
Yeah.
So
especially when they don't exist.
Yeah.
Waste people's gas money.
So they just made it up, is what you're saying.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that's why I don't watch any of these paranormal shows. Like, I can't deal with it. It's too bad. Like, I'm not going into it expecting any real science, and it's not even that entertaining to me. Like, there's very few of these type documentaries or stuff that are actually entertaining. Like the Stan Romanek one, for example, is very entertaining, but not in the way it tries to be.
I disagree. I could barely get through it.
I thought it was hilarious, but there's really just Mirage Men, honestly, and there are even people who have problems about the way they were depicted in that. So,
okay, I want to know about the Stan Romanek one now.
Oh, have you not seen the Stan Romanek documentary? We did a whole show about that back when it came out. It's incredible. I didn't know anything about Stan Romanek before I saw it, and when it finally got to his like ET footage and stuff, I had to stop and I was like, is this a joke? Like, is this like a mockumentary? Like, is this like this is Spinal Tap or something? Because I was so blown away by how fake everything looked. I thought it was like a joke. And then I had to read up on him. It's like, no, he's really trying to pass this stuff off as real. And
the thing about Romanek is I would I knew who he was, and then I would forget, and then someone would bring him up, and I'd be like, Romanek, who's Romanek? And I'd look it up, like, oh, this guy, and then and then I'd forget again, and then someone would bring him up, and I'd look him up, and he just never stuck in my head because the stuff was so preposterous.
Yeah, that documentary is incredible, though.
Oh, see, on some level that doesn't bother me so much because you watch it and it's just entertainment and it's stupid and it doesn't present itself as anything more.
Oh no, it's presenting itself as real.
Oh, it's just
really bad.
Serious.
Yeah, but you can tell. I mean, it's not like anyone's going to be misled by this.
You'd think, but then you look at like the comments on like YouTube about and people are like, oh, I guess aliens are real. Like, there are people who believe it. You can. I mean, YouTube's incredible for this. Every now, just for fun, I'll look up UFO videos on YouTube, and a lot of these people who post these videos, it's obviously just a CG, UFO. It doesn't even look good, but then there'll be people in the comments just eating it up.
Yep.
You'd think people would be able to tell, but geez, some people really can't.
I don't know. I guess I always figured they're like the Corey Good people who go to conferences to ask questions about blue avians and of Jacques Vallée or something.
Mm-hmm. That's why Jacques Vallée really retired. He doesn't want to deal with this crap anymore.
Yeah.
I don't blame him.
There's so much nonsense in this field, and this is the thing. When In Search Of does a show like that, it's feeding the skeptics. Because the closed-minded skeptics can take something like that and just run with it and be like, well, look what idiots these people are. This stuff doesn't, they can say everything Cherylee said, but do it in a really nasty way.
Oh, yeah. Well, not only that, but I mean, there was other parts of the show that were clearly, they were setting up this one fellow who kind of came forward and said, well, I'm an experiencer and I'll take a lie detector test for this. And so, they've got the host in the background going, oh, I really believe this guy. Yes, we'll do this. We'll bring in this expert in lie detection. And we have no idea what her credentials are. We don't really get to see the test so much. But it's pretty clear that she doesn't think that there's any possibility this is real from the way she's talking about it. So it's like, well, of course he's lying, because that can't have happened. That's an impossible thing. So clearly that's a lie.
Yeah.
And yet they fail to mention, well, there have been people who have taken lie detector tests along with multiple witnesses, and passed them, like Travis Walton, excuse me.
Yeah.
Like, there are cases where there's actual documented testing that's kind of worked out much better than this random guy that no one's ever heard of.
Yeah.
That off the street going, yeah, sure, I'll do a test. And I mean, he could be completely legitimate. I don't know, because I don't really know his history. Though, like, there's no way to really tell is he legitimate and that they gave a crappy test, or is he just some guy that they picked off a street corner somewhere and paid $20 to be on TV? We don't know.
Also, the fact is, those lie detectors are not that reliable. I mean, there's a lot of interpretation in those as well and not to mention, if the person's nervous, they're going to fail.
Yeah.
And they're inadmissible in court, which should tell you a lot about them.
Well, and could you do anything that makes you nervous with the TV cameras running?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know people who've had to take lie detector tests to get, SCI clearance, and it, I knew a guy who failed it twice, and just asking him questions just because he was super nervous about the whole thing. He's got these agents staring him down, asking him all these questions and stuff. And the other fact is that if somebody really believes that they had some sort of experience, even if it only happened in their head, they're going to pass a lie detector test, because a lie detector test doesn't tell you that something really happened. It just tells you that that person believed it happened.
Yeah.
Well, and even that was one of the things that made me kind of wonder, was that the woman who administered the test kind of said, well, I can't really speak to his experience. He might really believe that he had one. So, and it's like, well, if he really believed, wouldn't he have passed that test? And so aren't you just saying that you kind of failed him just because you didn't believe it was, a legitimate test? That kind of seemed to be a common thread throughout this. And then, the narrative in the show is oh, all these people, I really want to believe them. And then it's kind of the mantra of the show is, but science has shown no evidence for any of this.
That's weird. Why is there that narrative in it? Because that's odd. That seems very psyopic to me. I don't know. I don't want to get super paranoid, but that's interesting that they sort of in the end are well, science hasn't shown any proof of any of this.
Yeah. So we can believe them. They're nice stories, but
yeah.
And again, though, they're trying to prove that aliens are here, and if we're not dealing with aliens, you're kind of you're focused completely wrong.
Yeah, but that's still the narrative they push, though. It's kind of clever, because it's they because they talk a lot about aliens, they push this ET narrative, and then they kind of close it out at the end, apparently. But do they talk about any other possibilities of what these things could be?
Well, and Patient 17, that's how that movie starts, is these are aliens. We're looking for aliens.
Yeah, exactly. You start off in that box, and it's there's no more room to think about something if you box yourself in at the very beginning.
Yeah. And when they start from that point, both, the In Search of show and the Patient 17 movie, when they start from that point, it just, to me, it's well, okay, science has just gone out the window.
Yeah.
Because, there's no point in pretending we're doing anything scientific if that's where we're starting, because we need to be open to what could this be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, does anyone ever bring up the idea that, I know it's something I've said in the past, I heard Red Pill say this before too, but the idea that it may be similar to stigmata, or it could be similar to apports. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that it could be something that is created inside of someone by, I don't know how. I mean, it's just an idea. I'm not saying it's any more valid than it being ET, because we don't know. But you got to explore multiple avenues here. You can't just say, well, it's got to be ET, because you're starting from something you don't know.
Yeah.
That's not science.
And then you're trying to fit all the pieces together to prove what you think it is.
Exactly. It'll fit. You'll try to get it to fit that narrative that you created at the beginning.
And I think that part of the answer to a lot of this stuff is that our brains, our minds, whatever you want to call it, are capable of far more reality manipulation than we're fully aware of. So something like an apport or stigmata or something shouldn't be that odd to us if we understand that. Positive thinking does work. If someone's real positive minded, it doesn't mean that everything in their life is going to go well, but it means they're more likely to be healthy. They're more likely to deal with stuff better because they're positive. You know what I mean? And just I don't know. I think if people are more open to the type of people who are more sensitive to these things happening, are more likely to also have some sort of innate ability to manipulate reality more. So it's not that surprising. If you start believing you were abducted by aliens and that implants happen, well, there you go. Now you have an implant. But it was really you who put it there. Not consciously, obviously. And and then on top of that, you also have all the shamanistic stuff talking about how things would be implanted into the body of the shaman when they were taken apart and put back together again.
Yeah, like I'm definitely, I'm an occultist, and I definitely think about this in terms of like spirits as well.
Yeah.
Like, I think about things like, I'm going to say this. I haven't done enough research into this to know if this is all just crap or whatever, but it reminds me sort of like ectoplasm and the spiritualist stuff. Like things basically being created by spirits interacting with us. Yeah, but we don't know. It could be it could be psychosomatic, like you said. It could be something that we were creating inside of ourselves. Really don't know. That's
a combination of all these things.
Yeah, and that's why you have to approach the topic from a phenomenological standpoint, just like Kripal says. You can't go into this thinking it's any certain thing. You've got to take it on its own terms.
And the way these shows deal with it is, like I said, if you don't know this stuff, like if I watched that show, that In Search Of, I wouldn't know all the stuff Cherylee knew. And I doubt the majority of the population would.
Oh, they don't care either. That's the thing.
Well, some don't. Some would if that information was presented to them, though.
I think if they really cared, they would probably just look it up on their own.
Maybe.
Which it could be useful in that. It could get people looking at this and saying, "Hey, this is a mystery." Because so much of my childhood looking into this stuff was because of sightings and unsolved mysteries. Like, I was definitely like an ETH person when I was a little kid. So sometimes, it's good, even if these shows are basically just like popcorn junk, sometimes it can be good to get people interested in the topic. But then it's kind of up to them to actually be open-minded about it and do the research on their own.
True, and it makes people more comfortable to talk about the stuff because it's out there in pop culture, too.
Yeah, that's the other thing. So there are positive aspects of these TV shows. Like, ghost hunters and stuff. Like, ghosts are cool. I don't know what ghosts are, but I'm sure people see them. And I don't think anyone's ever successfully shown a ghost on any of the TV shows about ghost hunting. But it at least gets, if it gets people out there, like it gets them interested, it gets them investigating stuff. Some people might take it a step further and actually look at this stuff from an open mind.
I suspect some of the shows have caught interesting things that are not fake, that are genuine. That doesn't make them ghosts. And this is, and they're starting from that same sort of thing.
Exactly.
Ghost
we don't know what a ghost is. Yeah.
I actually know a parapsychologist, I think it's Lloyd Auerbach, who he's done a number. Yeah, he's done a number of TV shows, and he said there was one where they actually caught some poltergeist activity, and they didn't use that in the show.
Really?
Yeah.
How come?
That the producer that wasn't what they wanted to film. Wasn't one of the shots on their list, I guess. I don't know, but yeah, that's
I've known some local ghost hunters who were completely trustworthy. I don't think they faked anything. I don't think they're not even the type of people who I think would even think that way about it. They weren't like trying to popularize themselves or anything else. They were kind of just in it for themselves. And they captured some interesting stuff. I mean, they captured stuff moving on its own. They captured, a bunch of audio that was really interesting and very clear, but it doesn't prove that they were ghosts making it. I mean, certainly it's a possibility, but as far as proving that it is one thing or another, it's like, okay, so what you've proven is you can capture anomalous stuff that we can't easily explain, but that's it. We can't easily explain it.
It doesn't mean it's the spirit of a dead human being.
Right. It's a possibility, certainly. But how do you make that determination?
Even if I did a ritual to I went to my Greek necromancy books and I did a Greek necromantic ritual to summon like one of my dead ancestors and had a conversation with them. It still doesn't mean that they're literally like the ghost of one of my ancestors. You can't know these things.
Yeah, maybe because maybe it is, but maybe also because there's information all around us, and maybe there's information from our ancestors hidden in us, whether it be DNA or something else. That when you're doing that necromantic ritual, it plays out as if you've raised a spirit, but in reality, you're just found a way to access information.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to think that there are entities, non-human entities, right? But here's the thing about them. Like, if they exist, which I think they do, they exist in a frame of reference that we can't observe. And there's no telling like what kind of information that they would be able to get or what kind of form they could put on to make you think they're this or they're that. Or maybe they take the form of what you expect to see. I mean, we don't know. And I actually kind of think it's impossible to know. Because it's like trying to think of what a 4D cube looks like,
Yes, yeah.
It's like it's not something that we have a frame of reference that we can understand. We can only take the phenomenon on its own terms. We can only say it appeared to be this, but we have no ability to like really test that empirically.
What are your thoughts, Cherylee, on the implant thing?
I have a lot of mixed feelings on this. I mean, I kind of like the idea of it being kind of like an apport, or a stigmata, or, something more in the realm of psychokinesis, rather than being, aliens. But, that it's more a transfer of information than a transfer of substance. I don't know. I'm kind of on this new kick, like how Josh says everything is fairies. So I'm everything is information.
You wouldn't be wrong there. Everything is information.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the building blocks of the universe is information.
Yeah, and so could psychokinesis be transferring information?
And really, the alien idea. I mean, that's pretty clunky for what would have to be fairly advanced aliens to get here in the first place. Whether they flew here in spaceships or used wormholes or whatever theory people have, to have to put something that big and easy to find in someone, I mean, to me it seems like either like if they wanted to hide something, we wouldn't find it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're so easy to find and people know they have them.
So, hence, they're either put there with the intent of somebody finding them, or we're creating them based on what we believe would be there if something happened to us.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting. It definitely seems like if they're being put there by something, they're being put there to be found.
Yeah, so they're either there to teach us something or that we're teaching ourselves something.
Yeah, because... the one thing I know about things like demons and spirits is that they enjoy attention, like more than anything in the whole world. They don't want your soul. They just want you to have a conversation with it and see it and notice it, talk to it. That's what they really desire more than anything. And I mean, I tend to think that the implants, I mean, if they aren't like a psychokinetic phenomena, or they aren't like a stigmata type thing, I do put the possibility there that they're something that is formed there by an entity of some sort. Why? I don't know. I don't know why they would do that, other than just to be found, like we talked before.
And you get that sort of, even if it's put there to be found, it doesn't tell us anything, And that's so much of this stuff where it's like, oh, that's really interesting. You have this burnt circle in your yard where you saw a UFO come down.
Yeah.
We now know nothing more than we knew before we found your burnt circle,
Yeah, but we know about the burnt circle. I mean, this goes back into my idea, Seriah, about this thing sort of being like a self-replicating mimetic virus, in that because that's the question we got to ask ourselves. Like, why do these things want to be seen? Why do they want their stories to be spread? Because, I mean, at least some people, I know Whitley Strieber talks about this, some people in government have thought that it is a bad idea to give this stuff more attention.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if that's because I don't know what their intentions are. They certainly like the attention, and I think we should all stop and at least ask ourselves or think about, why do they want so much attention? Why do they want the stories told? Like, why do they want it spread? Why do these things follow people around? I don't think
okay, I was going to say that's not just the only danger here. The other problem is that we can make things even scarier. Like, if it's us, if our thinking about it changes it in some way, what if we keep making it scarier?
Yeah.
And the reason I'm saying this is because I had been doing some experiments with psychokinesis, and I had corresponded a little bit about it with Whitley Strieber, of all people, and he has a way of making things scary.
He does. Yeah, he does.
And just when I was doing really well with these experiments, I had a really frightening experience. And I swear, I don't want to blame him because it's not his fault. It's me being scared, but I think it's because he scared me, and then suddenly everything took kind of a scary turn, and I just stopped doing them for a long time, because I was in my basement by myself with my little dog, and our basement, like, that's where our rec room is, and I mean the floor here is just like a minefield of dog squeaky toys. And
I'm shocked.
You're shocked. I know. And I was down here by myself, and one of the toys squeaked like it had been stepped on, which made me jump because the dog was beside me asleep, and it was like, okay, why did that squeak? And then, so I was looking and getting really scared. And then another one of the toys, it was like somebody kicked it across the floor.
Huh.
And I said to myself, okay, I'm not doing these experiments anymore.
What was the experiment you were doing?
I was doing some experiments with a pinwheel in a jar, and normally I put my hand near it to get it to move, and I was doing experiments doing it more from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was working pretty well. and I showed the videos to a few people, and they were impressed. And it's like I still haven't been able to do that since, and I've kind of since then I have been contacted by a friend who wants to do some distance experiments with me, and I'm trying to get myself to the point where I'm brave enough again. And I swear, as soon as somebody broaches that subject, weird stuff starts to happen again. Like we're having lights coming on in the house again. I woke up on Halloween morning with weird bruises all over my arm. That I don't remember getting. There's been flickering lights in the house again, and it's like, oh dear. And I think it's me doing it because some part of me is making it scary. And I shouldn't.
I've had similar experiences with that. Like with recently, I had a sleep paralysis that was kind of turning into an out of body experience. And for some reason, I thought to myself during this, oh man, I hope no gray aliens walk into my room. and sure enough, I started to see some of the faces like start materializing.
Oh, sure.
And I was like, oh man. And I was like, get this out of my head, get it out of my head, get it out of my head. And then I just woke up and it went away. So I narrowly avoided getting abducted, apparently. But
by
I don't
yourself.
Really, yeah, by myself. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, was I calling something by thinking that? Or was I making it? Was it a construct that I was creating out of my imagination? I mean, I don't know. Is it a little bit of both, maybe? I mean, can things have agency and sentience when we create them with our mind? Because, things like the Philip experiment would say, yeah, you can create something with your head that then becomes its own living thing.
I had a listener who was asking about the skull experiments. Do you two know anything about them?
Yeah, that was actually the original group was done in England. There's the Skull Report, which was written by the Society for Psychical Research, and they did find things that seemed legitimately anomalous.
So what were they doing?
Oh, okay. It was basic, mediumship type of a mediumship circle where they were trying to get objects to move or apports to appear. And they had a lot of different phenomena in terms of, in one case, and this happened in front of the scientists who were there to study it, a crystal appeared and the scientist was invited to touch it and it seemed solid. And then he was to take his hand away and then touch it again. And the second time it was just like a hologram, like it was visible but not there. And there was also photographic film, like 35 millimeter film that was placed in sealed boxes in the room. And then after the seances, they would run the film through a developer machine, and they'd get all these really bizarre images and writing. Thomas Edison's signature and some plans to make a device to help facilitate spirit communication was part of that. And they stopped for a long time. And it's one of these strange endings where that it started with ghosts and spirits and then ended with aliens.
How did it get into aliens?
That they had these images towards the end, and I wish I had the stuff in front of me because it's been a while since I've looked at any of this, but they seem to be getting images of what looked like grays on the photographic film. And they were told that they had to stop the experiments because there was interference from entities from the future.
Okay.
Yeah, like I know it seems really bizarre. And then a number of years later, they were given the green light to do it again. And apparently it's been started up again. There's actually a pretty good lecture, and I think it's still like really available to anyone in the public on the Rhine Research Center website. That there's a lecture there about the Skull Group and sort of gives the history of it. And they also have one of the people from the Skull Group, Robin Foy, who answers questions from the audience. It's a pretty good overview. It's not the most scientifically based because it's not like reading the Skull Report, which was published in the Society for Psychical Research Journal. But it's a pretty good overview of the history of the group and what was done.
Now, was there some controversy about it too?
Well, there were a lot of skeptics were invited to go, and I'm not sure if any of them actually did go. I think there might have been some. I mean, a lot of scientists were invited to come to these sessions. I mean, certainly there was a lot of, it must be fake because we can't explain it kind of thing. Like, this can't be real, so it isn't. But there was I don't know. You would really have to go through, the published literature on it to kind of see the history. But yeah, there were certainly people that disagreed with whether or not it was legitimate, and certainly there may have been a difference in what was done while the scientists were there versus, like, they made kind of a traveling show of this, and what they might have done when there was no scientists there and it was just, for the, the fans of the group kind of
Right,
thing.
right. Made it more performance oriented.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if that was an issue or not. I know some of the other more modern groups, like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Felix group.
I don't think so.
Felix experimental group out of Germany. And Stephen Brody did some work with them. And he found what he thinks are some legitimate table tipping phenomena going on there. But unfortunately, the medium of the group seems to have been caught in some fraud too. Now, Brody has written it up as kind of a mixed mediumship kind of thing where, yeah, there's some fakery going on, but there's actually also some stuff that seems legitimately unexplained.
Right.
And then there's other people that say, well, if there's been any fakery, let's just throw the whole case out.
And then,
which I can understand too.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, fakery just seems to weave its way into all of this stuff because it's not available on demand.
Yeah. And I think that was that group. I mean, the medium that's involved with that, he's become a bit of a celebrity, and these sittings are becoming, a really big thing, and he's becoming almost a spiritual leader rather than just a guy participating in these interesting experiments.
Who was there was a psychic who was on Sci-Fi Channel at one point. Was it John Edwards?
Yeah, John Edwards, yeah.
And from what I read about him, he actually was did a ton of laboratory tests and performed very, very well. And, of course, he eventually got caught where they would mic the audience and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, if you have to go out there every night and perform, you probably can't. And if you start getting stuff wrong, you're going to start losing viewers.
Yeah, my one caveat there is that the researcher that he worked with is not the best.
Okay.
And I have some personal experience with this, and I don't really want to go public with that. But I think that there may have been some methodological concerns.
So maybe he was more just charismatic than psychic.
Perhaps.
What about what's his name that James Randi was always going after?
Geller?
Yeah, Geller. Because my feelings on Geller is he probably had some genuine ability, but again, when you're in a big stage and you have to perform,
you're going to do sleight of hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because psychic powers aren't reliable. That's the problem with PK, is that it's not reliable.
That's right. And I think with Geller, he did some work with, the people at the Stanford Research Institute that was published, and it wasn't so much on the psychokinesis part that got published. It was about remote viewing, basically. He's a very good remote viewer.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that was actually what was published about him.
Interesting. Yes, because I was going to say, like, the real psychics, the people with real abilities, they aren't on TV. They're working for spooks, like Ingo Swann was. Like, they're behind the scenes doing stuff. I don't know. If I actually was, like, I don't know, really good at PK or something, I wouldn't want to go on TV and do it. Because, like, I mean, who knows? Like, that's what blows me away that Joe McMoneagle did, like, that TV program with that Japanese television studio. And I mean, he had good results. Joe McMoneagle's been on a lot of TV shows and has had really good results. But I mean, he's also probably one of the best remote viewers who's ever lived. So
he also gets off on the pressure.
Yeah, I think he does.
He does. He totally did.
But But he's really good though. That's the thing. It's like he doesn't have to worry about it. He knows he's good. So it's like,
I know, but he enjoys that conflict.
Yeah.
He like, whereas I would be like,
I think Ed May likes
upset.
it too.
I'd be getting upset, and I would find it really difficult. Whereas he's like, yeah, bring it on, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hesitant to even do magic for other people, because it's like if I do a ritual for someone or I do magic for someone, I always give them the caveat like, hey, I can't guarantee this is going to work. Like, sure. I'll do my best. And, I've had stuff work in the past, but I can't promise you this is going to work. And I don't accept money for anything. I mean, God, I wouldn't want anyone to pay me to do magic.
And how much of, if it does work, is them believing that what you're doing is going to work?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, I've had results that weren't that. So I know that is something that could happen too. But I've also had results from stuff where I was, like, say, instance, doing something for my girlfriend who thinks this is all garbage and just sort of humors me. and it still worked. So.
True. I'm not saying, again, any of this stuff, I think there's multiple factors playing into it.
Yeah. Now, that could definitely be a factor. Just like give someone, a magic feather like Dumbo, and they just get really confident that everything's going to work out, and it does. But I've also done stuff for people. I don't want to say in secret, because I always get people's consent before I do anything like magical related to them, because that's important to me. But I've told some people, hey, you seem to be having a tough time with this. Would you mind if I did like something for you magically? Just gotten permission to do it, but not tell them what I'm going to do, and then see the results from that happen. So it's always interesting. It never fails to make me like giddy when it actually works, and it works more than you think it would.
Well, there is something called the experimenter effect, where the beliefs of the people doing scientific experiments have a much stronger effect on the outcome of the results than one might think is possible. And like, this has been published and shown to occur again and again.
I think I remember hearing Dr. Radin talking about that.
Yeah. And, the problem is that, and science overall, generally, even though that's been published and it's an effect we should be aware of, we're all ignoring it because it's just too horrible to contemplate.
Well, they don't want to admit to themselves that they're doing magic. So,
yeah, pretty much.
What were the other PK things you would put up, Cherylee? I know you were talking about them in the Slack.
You put up that one video of the guy at the Russian research lab. I retweeted that because I thought it was cool, and it was interesting. I've never actually seen like one of those demonstrations with the pinwheel before. So at first I was like, well, nothing's happening, but then I kind of sped up the YouTube video, and I was like, oh, something is happening. Yeah. It's just really slow. Is it normally that slow, or have you seen more dramatic results from that experiment?
Well, it kind of depends on who's doing it. Some people can move a lot faster.
Okay.
Yeah. But, this was somebody who was just trained in it and just, George is a physicist, and he had gone to this place in Russia where they train people to do this. And
I want to go there.
I know. Cool. I know. And so he had done this trip just to see if there was anything to this stuff. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the result. So, and yeah, it's a tiny effect, but there's an effect.
Yeah. And it shouldn't be an effect.
And so, yeah, he's done a lot more work on it since that time. He practices all the time, but unlike me, who's, I'm just not.
Yeah. I know one of the other things you posted was the whole the To the Stars going to Italy, and they're making a very big deal out of the fact that they went to Italy and shared their secrets with the Italian government and the Vatican and all this other stuff. But from the article, it looks more like they just talked to the Italian version of MUFON.
Pretty much, yeah. And there were some mistakes in the in the talk as well. That although apparently Luis Elizondo, he posted on Facebook afterwards, when people brought it to his attention, there were mistakes in your talk, because he was showing a picture that he claimed were UFOs over Washington D.C. I think, someplace, or I'm not positive on the location now, but they were supposed to be real UFOs, and somebody pointed out, no, those are not pictures of real UFOs. That's been established. That's just somebody's concept drawing of UFOs kind of thing.
Hell yeah.
And so then he kind of he came clean and said, oh yeah, it's been pointed out that I made mistakes. And it's very good of you to help me out with this, and so that we can get all the mistakes cleared up and out of the way, and kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. And people have kind of commented that no, they were not invited by the government of Italy. They were invited by the local UFO group.
Yeah.
Like I'm at the point now where just like I love To the Stars Academy. I think they rule. They are straight up carnival folk, like at this point. And like don't hate that they went on like a free Italian vacation. And if you are donating money to the Stars Academy and that's what they spent the money on, you deserve it. Like a sucker's born every day. All right. I will always love con men deep inside my heart. It's my favorite thing. It's a great American pastime.
Now you've been working on your out of body stuff, Wren.
I have. Had one yesterday, actually. I've been reading Journeys Out of the Body again. I haven't read it in like probably 6 or 7 years. So
and that is by
Robert Monroe.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was his sort of groundbreaking book about out of body experiences. It's extremely good. It's probably the best book ever written on them. If you're even slightly interested in the topic of astral projection or out of body experiences, whatever you want to call it, his book is the one you should start with. It's an incredible book, and I've actually gotten to the point where my separations have become way easier than they used to be. But there's still all these like weird factors that I'm trying to experiment with. It's interesting because it's like an entirely different state of like being, right? So just let's say my experience yesterday, I felt really tired. I'd gotten off work around 6. I was really sleepy, so I decided to just like go ahead and take a nap. Might just sleep until the morning. So I lay in bed and I'm like listening to a podcast while I'm trying to fall asleep, and I start to feel like Robert Monroe describes it exactly the same way, but it's kind of like if you've ever held on to like a pipe or something that's not grounded properly, you get that sort of like electric vibration going through you, or that hum. And that's what I felt. And what was weird is that I had a lot of like noise with it this time too, like a sort of like an oscillating noise, like going on in my head, almost like sort of like the buzzing that people talk about. And so I was like, okay, cool. Well, this is happening. So I'm going to go ahead and try to go out of body. So as I was laying on my side, and I just sort of started twisting a little bit. And it was really hard to see at first. And what's interesting, I've been reading this other book by another guy from Minneapolis who wrote about his out-of-body experiences. And that was also a problem that he had a ton, was just like sight. Like your vision is either like tunneled, or it's like you get black splotches. Like it's very hard to see.
What was the other book?
I don't have it with me. It's at my girlfriend's house.
Okay. I
wish I could remember the name of it, but it's another book about out-of-body experiences, and like one guy's sort of experiments with it. But I was able to like sort of see like a shadowy versions of my own arms. And so I'm like kind of like stumbling around my bedroom like a drunk. Like I can't like get my bearings. I'm sort of floating around. And I finally just like see the window, and I just like dive through the window. And I end up outside my apartment building. And the last couple times I've had these out-of-body experiences where I've stayed sort of in what looks like the real world, I have been trying to like go to space or go to the moon or whatever. Last time I tried to go to the moon, I ended up in orbit around Jupiter. And this time, yeah, that was an experience. I ended up in front of a moon, but it was a Jovian moon. But see, when I did that, when the Jupiter experience happened, there's like a sort of a way you, God, this stuff is so hard to explain. There's sort of a way you sort of teleport when you're in an out of body state. Robert Monroe describes it as like rubber banding. Like you feel like you stretch really far out and then like you snap there. And that's sort of how it feels for me too. But there's like a twist in the middle. Like I feel like I stretch out really far and I twist 180 degrees and then I'm at the place I'm supposed to be at. But in this case, I saw the moon and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the moon, but I'm not going to like try to just like teleport there because I want to overshoot it like I did last time. I want to try to just go straight there, fly there. So I started flying, but then realized that like I can't really get enough altitude. So I decided just to close my eyes and just launch myself, like not look, because I was thinking that me looking down and getting vertigo was what was keeping me from going higher. So that actually worked. I shot up really fast. I could feel like speed and like wind on me. And I ended up opening my eyes at one point to kind of make sure I was still on course. And it looked like I was probably about 30 to 40 kilometers up in the air. Like there were clouds way, way below me. It was nighttime. And I immediately got like super sense of vertigo. And as soon as that vertigo hit, like my stomach dropped. And then I started falling and like tumbling through the air. And I was like, oh, I shouldn't have looked. Because like the vertigo was like causing me not to be able to fly. So I managed to like kind of get control of myself again and start going up. And I managed to get what I think would have been about 60 kilometers up. Like I started to see like the curvature of the earth and like the sky had turned completely black. And then I woke up back in my body. Now there were some interesting things about this though, in that when I went outside, I saw a full moon. Later that evening, because after the out of body experience, I got up. I was like wide awake, so I got up and went to go kind of make some dinner. And I walked outside for a minute, and you couldn't even see the moon. There was like complete cloud cover. And I looked at the moon phase, and it's like half or whatever. Like it wasn't a full moon last night. So there's an interesting question there. Like, was I still in the real world, or was I dreaming? Because the moon wasn't full last night, but I definitely saw a full moon in the experience. And the other interesting aspect of that is it's hard to say that I was dreaming because remember I was listening to that podcast. I never stopped hearing that podcast during the entire out of body experience because I guess my physical body was laying in bed still and you'd still hear it. And there was no loss of consciousness because, I lucid dream too. But in a lucid dream, there's like a distinct, like I'm in bed and then I lose consciousness and then I'm in a dream. Right. But this experience was seamless, from laying on my side in bed to standing up to like going outside. It was completely seamless. And I kept hearing the podcast the entire time while I was doing it. So, I mean, I don't know. Like if you talk to people like Gordon White, they say that these discrepancies, and Monroe talks about this too. And in the other book I'm reading to talk about this, the real world always has discrepancy, or the out-of-body version of the real world always has these discrepancies. Things are slightly different than the way they are in, the quote-unquote real world. And someone like Gordon would say in his like journeying course that what you're experiencing when you're out of body is the dreaming of the real world. It's sort of like, it's like the upside down in Stranger Things or something. It's like the version of the world that exists on top of it, but is also full of things like imaginary constructs and things that are slightly different from the way they are and what we experience as reality. I don't know if that's really what's going on, but that's what certain like indigenous people believe. Like they believe that, when you have a dream of the forest, you're actually going to the forest. You're just in the dream version of the forest.
Right.
But, sometimes when I have these out-of-body experiences, I had this really super dramatic out-of-body experience several, probably a month or two ago, where I definitely wasn't in the real world anymore. Like I went to a bunch of different places and talked to things and interacted with entities. And I traveled to like 7 or 8 different places. And on one hand, you can look at that and say, well, I was just having a lucid dream. And maybe I was. I don't know. All I can say is that I when this happens to me, I don't experience any loss of consciousness in between laying in bed, like feeling like I stand up out of my body, and then usually like I'll go through a door or a window or something, and I'll be in another place, like I'm just a completely different world.
Now, Cherylee, I mean, you've had obviously out-of-body experiences as near-death experiences. Have you had any out-of-body experience otherwise?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't like having them, actually.
I kind of thought that was the case.
Yeah.
I love them. Why don't you like them?
Because when I was a kid, I was afraid that staying out of my body meant I would die. And that I didn't want to hurt my parents by dying. So that was,
yeah.
No, you can.
I've never been. That's weird because a lot of other people say that too. Like Robert Monroe was scared of that. That's a really common fear from people who have these experiences, and it's something that like I can't relate to at all because I've never been scared of that. It's like I want to stay out of my body. I've never been scared that I'm going to die because in all of my experiences, it's so hard to stay out of my body in the first place. I'm not ever worried about not being able to get back because, like you just get sent back, when you go too far or wake up or whatever.
But see, for me, because I almost died.
Oh yeah, true.
And
yeah.
And I felt guilty that about the whole if I left my parents, what would it do to them? I wasn't worried about me. I mean, me dying, that's not a big deal. It was more what it would do to them that upset me, and so I just felt like I had this responsibility to stay in myself, and it's hard after you've had a near-death experience. There's this tendency to kind of just slide out of yourself.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, because for me, it's like really hard to do it. Like I can barely control it. Like I'm lucky if I'm able to do it.
Yeah. See, for me, it was happening repeatedly, particularly when around the age, after the experience when I was 10. And it started up like that again after I was in a car accident when I was 29, where I would just kind of slide out of myself again. And it was almost harder to stay in, to stay put. Like you don't feel like the connection is as solid as it should be. Yeah.
When would you tend to slip out? Would it be like when you're going to sleep at night or just, during the day?
When I was going to sleep at night, sometimes just relaxing or doing something like drawing or knitting. Something that's kind of repetitive
like
and
meditative.
Relaxing. Yeah. Like knitting, where you're just kind of counting the stitches and it's very, you zone out, I guess.
It's hypnotic almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Like I've got to be in a certain, I'm not a very good meditator. I've tried to be a better meditator. I'm just not very good at it. But like the one thing that always triggers it for me is like sleep deprivation, which puts people in a hypnotic state if they're really sleep deprived. Sure. Usually like if I don't really get much sleep that week, only get like a couple hours of sleep every night, I can almost guarantee that like, once that sleep that builds to a certain level, I'm going to end up having either sleep paralysis or an out of body experience. I can't say that you talking about being looser like is interesting because I feel like it's gotten easier for me to do it. Like it used to be really hard for me. I would just have sleep paralysis, right? Like I wouldn't be able to get out of my body. But the more I do it, the easier it is. And now it feels like I'm just sort of jumping right out when it happens rather than sort of feeling like I have to peel myself out.
Yeah. See, well, for me, it feels like I'm falling out.
Interesting. So like in your out of body experiences that you've had, are you seeing anything like the stuff I was talking about? Like, have you seen anything similar? Because I always try to see if people are having experiences similar to mine, so I can at least compare it.
I typically tend to, mostly because I think I feel like I have to, I tend to stay very close to home. Although actually I do have a lot, usually ones when I've fallen asleep and I'll find myself in a favorite place where I lived for a long time. It's a wilderness area. It's very special to me, and that's where I tend to find myself most often. But yeah, usually I tend to stick around the house. Actually, one time I actually woke my husband when I was in that state, and he saw both me sleeping and me like floating like above him. Like he thought I was standing above the bed, and then he looked over and saw me sleeping beside him and freaked out.
Did he see you? Did he see you like as a solid thing? Because I've heard like, I think Whitley talked about this before, and Monroe talked about this before, that they could appear to people, but they would appear like as a vapor, you know, or like sort of like what people would imagine like a ghost would look like. But did you look solid to him, like you were just floating there?
Well, you know, because it was dark.
Yeah.
He just thought it was like, you know, he just assumed it was me because who else would be in the house? There was no one else in the house.
Right.
Yeah.
And he just thought it was me standing over him in the bed, and then it was kind of darkish and he couldn't really, you know, but he was sure it was me. And he actually reached out towards me, and that's when I panicked because I saw the hand come towards me, and then I went back into myself.
Yeah, that kind of thing makes me think about doppelganger stories, you know, like the idea that you would see someone out in public, like, you know, just glance someone walking down a street and you're like, that looks just like this person, but I know they're not here right now, or I know that they're asleep, or they're gone on vacation or something. Like, how often, because I thought about this because recently I had I don't know, it was like a lucid dream, right? Like I was dreaming, I was asleep, it wasn't an out-of-body experience, but I had a lucid dream where I went to a place where even though I knew I was quote-unquote dreaming, I couldn't do anything that you can normally do in a lucid dream. I didn't have any control over the environment. I tried to like make things happen, and people were just like staring at me like I was psycho. And it was like an alternate universe. Like I was in a place where I would be now. It was like in the Midwest, like in sort of the Minneapolis area, except it was called Elphesia, and they were like going to war, and someone showed me a map, and it showed that the US was like broken up into like 6 sort of autonomous regions. And you know, people were like really confused, like why I was asking this stuff, like why did I not know this? Like they were asking me like, where did I come from, or where was I from, or whatever, and I just didn't know. And eventually I woke up, but I sort of wondered about that later. It was like, did I go to another place in a dream? Like, because it wasn't like a lucid dream. I knew I was asleep. I knew I was dreaming, but I couldn't do anything like I couldn't in a lucid dream normally. I couldn't fly or change the environment or anything. And it made me think, like, how many people, if that's possible, how many people do we see on a day-to-day basis that are just like from another universe and just don't even know it? They're just having a dream, or they think they're having a dream.
I don't know. You know, I've had like dreams that seem very lucid that turned out to be like real situations happening to people I knew.
Like you're seeing it from their point of view?
No, like I was kind of observing it.
Oh, interesting. So like you were kind of like remote viewing their experience.
Almost, but it felt more like it felt like a lucid dream. I mean, it typically has been really emotional experiences. There was one where a friend of mine was, to put it nicely, sexually assaulted by a man that we both worked with, and I mean, she was beaten up pretty badly. And it was a case where we had gone out with a bunch of friends to go to the clubs dancing, and she wanted to stay with some people we knew and come back later, and I went home with an earlier group. And when I was sleeping, I basically had what I thought at the time was just the worst nightmare ever of this attack. And then, of course, the next morning I found out that, like, I had to take her to the hospital after what happened. And, you know, it was a real thing. It wasn't just a dream. And I don't know if, so I don't know if it was like a precognitive dream that I was going to find out what happened to her, but she never told me the details. Like, I knew the details.
Or were you out of body observing it?
Yeah, or was I out of body actually there observing it?
Yeah, like drawn by her emotions.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's where we get telepathy from, is telepathos.
So
yeah.
we are just about out of time. You two willing to continue this in Patreon?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Tell people real quick where they can find you, Wren.
You can find me at liminalroom.com and on Twitter at Mr_Apol.
And Cherylee, how's the book going?
Oh, just don't even ask me. Jinxing it. You're jinxing it.
All right. Okay. We'll just assume it's good. All right. Thank both of you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Where Did the Road Go would not be what it is without help from our Patreons. And a special shout out to those pledging $10 or more: Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Andy McNamara, Charles Beauregard, Craig Cisternos, Jose A., Scott Morris Everett, Robert Groom, Roland Belstead, Riker and Stark, Russell Wilcoxon, Sasha Lord, Christopher Vaughn, Ben Crow, Carla Mahoney, John Eddy, Chris, Mark Brady, William Lovelace, Patricia Giaquinta, Kevin Schreck, Alex Bowes, and Alfred Tuttle. Thank you all so much. All right, this conversation continues actually for over another hour with Cherylee and Wren, getting into all kinds of subjects, kind of like this was to begin with. So if you're a Patreon, you already have it. It was uploaded with this show. So there you go. If you want to become a patron, you can get all the content for $3 a month, and I try to provide as much as possible. I do have a couple shows yet to post and some cool stuff coming up. I've just still dealing with the aftermath of everything that happened to me back in August, particularly the flooding issues, and it's making me a little slow to get stuff up. So it will happen. The show's still going. It's not going anywhere. And I thank everyone who helped me make that happen, because it was a rough few months, and it's still a little rough, but it's getting better. And yeah, we will see what the future holds, but hopefully very cool stuff. I have a few really interesting books I'm going through, and I'll have those authors on. And as I said, I have a couple shows that I have yet to air that are already recorded. I just have to edit them and put them up, and honestly haven't had as much time as I would like to do that. So that'll be soon, I promise, and see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.